Good morning, students. In today's class, I will explain about another type of constructor called copy constructor. In our previous sessions, we learned about two different types of constructor. The first one is default constructor, a constructor which does not take any argument. We call it as a default constructor. The next one is parameterized constructor, a constructor which takes at least an argument. We call it a parameterized constructor. In today's class, I will explain about copy constructor. As a recap, in the last class, we learned about how constructors can be overloaded. What do you mean by constructor overloading? A constructor overloading is a concept in an object-oriented programming where we have a set of constructor in the same program which differ in the number of argument or the data type of the argument. So just similar to member function, a constructor can also be overloaded because a constructor is also a special type of member functions only. We also studied about what are the benefits of overloading constructor, and we studied the concept of constructor overloading with some simple example programs. In today's class, we will be learning about the concept of copy constructor in C++, and one benefit of constructor overloading is how an array can be initialized using constructor. At the end of today's session, you will be able to understand the concept of copy constructor and also how copy constructor can be implemented in C++ and a way of initializing an array using constructor. A copy constructor is one of the benefits of constructor overloading. It is an advantage of constructor overloading concept. What do you mean by copy constructor? A copy constructor is nothing but it is generally used to declare and initialize an object from another object. That means the data members of one object can be copied into another object using copy constructor. So generally, a constructor is executed when the object is created. So here what happens is when an object is created, the constructor of that object is executed. Then using that object, we are initializing another object. So it is similar to assigning the content of one object to another object, but instead of using assignment operator, we are assigning the values of one object to another object using copy constructor. So it's a form of operator overloading. Let us take this example. This is the way a copy constructor is used. The statement D2 inside the bracket D1. Here what happens is D1 is one object, D2 is one object. So at the time of declaring object D2, inside the parameter parentheses, you are specifying another object called D1. Then what happens is, first already the object D1 is created with the values for the data member. So with the statement D2 within the parentheses D1, what happens is the complete content of all the data members of D1 is automatically copied into D2. So this will define the object D2, at the same time initialize the object D2 to the content of the object D1. So this is equivalent to data D2 equal to D1. Here what happens is D1 is also an object of data class. D2 is also another object of data class only. So just equal to D2 equal to D1, what happens is the content of D1 is assigned to D2. So a copy constructor does the same work as that of an assignment operator. So when we take up some simple program, we'll be able to understand the concept of copy constructor. The basic function of any copy constructor is to initialize another object through some other object. So this is how a copy constructor is defined. Class name, inside bracket, class name and object name. Because every constructor has the same name as the copy or same name as the class name. So here the class name is constructor name. Inside the bracket, you have to pass one object as a parameter with the address of that object. Then the body of the constructor. So a copy constructor takes only one argument, which is nothing but object of the corresponding class. Initiating an object through copy constructor is also known as copy initialization. So another name for copy constructor is copy initialization. So the main task of copy constructor is just similar to assignment operator, but there is a slight difference between you copying the content of one object to another object using assignment operator and by using copy constructor. The difference between assignment and copy constructor is that copy constructor will create separate block of memory for the new object, while assignment operator does not create separate block of the memory. So with this example, we are able to understand the concept of copy constructor easily. Class data. Here our class name is data, private in text. So the class data has only one data member called x of integer type, which is declared under the access specifier private. Next, under the public column, just data, open the parenthesis, close it, open the bracket and close it. So what is the purpose of that constructor? That constructor, because that is also one type of constructor, because the name of the constructor is name of the class name. Here the class name is also data, the constructor name is also data. But the thing is, this constructor is not accepting any argument. So such a constructor, we call it as default constructor. See, within the body of that constructor, I have not written any statement. Just I have put, it's just to have empty statement by putting them within one braces called open brace and closing brace. The purpose of such a constructor is to allocate the space for the object. Whenever in the program, if you create an object, automatically the space for that object is allocated using such constructor. So here, the first constructor is a default constructor. Next, the second constructor, again, the name is data only. But for this constructor, you're passing one parameter of integer type called a, and the value of a is assigned to x. So the second constructor is example for parameterized constructor because it takes only one argument. The third one is copy constructor. What is the syntax of copy constructor? First, the class name. And within the bracket, you have to pass one object as an argument with the address of that one. So here the class name is data. Again, class name is data and ampersand object name. Here the object name is n. So now you are passing the object called n as a parameter. And whenever you declare an object, automatically it has a member data called x. So now what happens is the n dot x. So the data member of the object you are passing as a parameter is assigned to x. Now I write one member function called display, void display, see out the value of x. Close the function, close the class. So here what happens is this class has one private data member called x with altogether 4 functions. Out of that one, first 3 are constructor. The first one is constructor without argument. Next one is constructor with one argument. And third one is a copy constructor. So one rule about the copy constructor is it should start with the name of the class. Within the parenthesis, you have to pass the address of an object of the corresponding class. Here the class name is data. Now what happens is n is an object. And it has one member function called display where you are displaying the value of x. Next you go to the main function. Void main data d1 within the parenthesis 100. What happens is, so when here we are creating an object called d1, when the moment the object is created, automatically what is executed? Constructor is executed. Here what happens is you are passing one parameter. What is the parameter value? 100. In that case, it will execute the second constructor. It will execute this constructor. Because you are passing a parameter called 100. So here a value will become 100. That is assigned to the member data called x. So now what happens is for the object d1, x value become 100 because the a value is 100. That is assigned to x. So here, so d1 dot x becomes 100. So for the first object, the data member value becomes 100. Next one is comma d2 within the bracket parenthesis d1. So there what happens is it automatically creates an object called what? D2. And within the parenthesis, you are passing the object D1. Now what happens is the content of D1 object is copied into D2. So that is the purpose of copy constructor. So here, what is the member data of D1? D1.x is how much? D1.x is 100. So same thing, now it is copied into D2. Now D2.x also become 100 only. Now you call the display function D1.display. When you call the display function is D1, it display the member data x of the object D1 means 100. Using the copy constructor, this is the way, this is the copy constructor. This is the copy constructor. So this is the way, this is the place of creating an object called D1. So here what happens is when the moment the object is D1 is created, since you're passing a parameter 100, D1.x become 100. So using the copy constructor D2 within the bracket D1, the content of D1 is copied into D2 means D2.x also become 100. So otherwise, if the copy constructor is not there, then what you have done, what you have to do is D2 equal to D1, then you call D1.display, then D2.display. With the copy constructor, automatically the content of one object is copied into another object. Now, I will take one more example which illustrates the advantages of constructor overloading. That is how to initialize an array using constructor. So, class data, private int n. So, this class data has one private member called n of integer type. Then public data, open the bracket, close it. So, what is this one? This is a constructor. There in the first constructor, I am initializing n equal to 0. So, the first constructor is constructor without argument. It's also called a default constructor. Then you write one more constructor where you pass one parameter called x of integer type. Then x value is assigned to n. So, this is an example for parameterized constructor. So, this constructor is an example for default constructor, and this constructor, the second constructor, is an example for parameterized constructor. Here the parameter value is x. Show third one is a member function. There you display the value of n. Okay. Next, void main d1 data d1 square bracket 5. What happens is automatically it creates how many objects? 5 objects. D1 of 0, D1 of 1, D1 of 2, D1 of 3, and D1 of 4. Then comma. So here what happens is you are creating an array of how many objects? 5 objects. For all the 5 objects, the constructor is executed. What constructor is executed? Constructor without parameters executed. So now what happens is for the first object D1 0 also n value becomes 0. Second object also n is 0. For all the 5 objects, n value will be 0. Next what happens is you create another array of D2, again 5 element with the value 1, 3, 5, 10. So here what happens is 1 is a parametric value. So now for the second object, for the first object, all the 5 objects, D1 of 0, D1 of 1, D1 of 2, D1 of 3, D1 of 4, for all the 5 objects, n value becomes 0. Whereas for the second object, that is also an array of objects. There what happens is D2 of 0 becomes how much? 1. Now it will execute. It will make use of the second constructor. Now for the second object, x value becomes how much? 1. Now what happens here? That is assigned to n. So for the second object, D2 of 0, the member data value becomes 1. D2 1, the member data value becomes 3. For the next one, it becomes 5. For the next one, it becomes 5. For the last one, it becomes 5. Now what happens here? You call I equal to 0, I less than or equal to 4, I plus plus. You call the show function with each object of D1. What is printed? For all the 5 objects of D1, the member data n is 0. So it becomes how much? 0, 0, 0, 0. Whereas when you call the same for I equal to 0, I less than or equal to 4, I plus plus, you call the show function with D2 of I. Now for D2 of I, what happens is it becomes 1, 3, 5, 9, 10. So now what happens is you are initializing. Here, this is the place of creating what? An array of object. Now, when you create an array of object, the first data value, first array value is 1. So that goes to x value. So x value is assigned to n, means for the object D2 of 0, n becomes so D2 0 dot n becomes 0. D2 1 dot n becomes how much? 3. D2 2 dot n becomes 5. D2 3 dot n becomes 9. And D2 4 dot n becomes 10. Because here what happens is we are having 2 array of objects D1 of 5. That means it creates 5 objects named as D1 of 0, D1 of 1, D1 of 2, D1 of 3, D1 of 4, D1 of 5, D1 of 4. For again, D2 within the square bracket 5 means it creates another 5 objects represented as D2 0, D2 1, D2 2, D2 3, D2 4. Whereas for the D1 0 dot n is 0, D1 1 dot n is also 0, D1 2 dot n also. For all the 5 objects, the n value becomes 0 in case of the array of object D1. Whereas for D2, what happens is D2 is the square bracket 0 dot n equal to 1, D2 1 dot n becomes 3, D2 2 dot n is 5, D2 3 dot n is 9, D2 4 of dot n equal to 10. So when you call the show function with every object of D1, it displays the member data n of each object. So in all the 5 objects initialized to 0. In case of D2, they are initialized to the value 1, 3, 5, 9, 10. So this is the way of initializing an array element using constructor here. Here for the object D2, the second constructor is executed. That is constructor with parameters executed. Whereas for the first, for the array object D1, the default constructor is executed. Okay. In today's class, we have discussed about the concept of copy constructor and how array can be initialized using constructor. So based on review questions, based on today's class, there is some of the probable examination questions or review questions could be illustrate copy constructor with an example. Illustrate is an example array initialization using constructor. Let us take some simple multiple choice question to revise what we have studied in today's class. Dash helps in copying data of one object to another object. We know that the data of one object can be copied into another object using copy constructor. The correct answer is A, copy constructor. The parameter for copy constructor is wherever using copy constructor, the copy constructor accept one argument, which is nothing but address of the object. So the correct insert is class name, address, object name. So the correct answer is B. Difference between copy constructor and assignment operator is copy constructor creates separate block of memory for object. Assignment operator creates separate block of memory for object. Both create separate block of memory. None of them create separate block of memory. Which is the correct answer? The correct answer is C. Copy constructor creates separate block of memory for the object, whereas the assignment operator does not create a separate block of memory. Copy constructor is an advantage of default constructor, parameter constructor, constructor overloading. None of these. The correct answer is C. Array initialization can be done through default constructor, parameterized constructor, constructor overloading, copy constructor. So array initialization is an application of constructor overloading. Oh, sorry, it's an example for copy constructor. Sorry. So with this, I will conclude today's class. For any of your doubt and clarification, you can call me over that number. Thank you.